Welcome everyone to the Ford Hall Forum at Suffolk University. You are now part of a flash forum. As I was saying to one of the audience members, I'm happy to report that I could not have planned a forum on the Boston Marathon bombing while we were putting the brochure together. However, we've got it tonight. We've got a great conversation for you. Before we begin, I have a couple of announcements. This event, like all of our events, is being recorded and will be available on YouTube and iTunes. The best way to see it is wait a couple of weeks, because that's usually how long it takes for me to post it. Go on to fordhallforum.org and click on where it says YouTube. And that will tell you when we have new things posted to YouTube. If you are sharing a comment or a question, in the time where we have comments or questions, I'd like you to speak directly into that mic or that mic so that we can hear you, but also so that the videographer in the back can record your voice. Please understand that by speaking, you're giving the Ford Hall Forum permission to record you. I am not only introducing the forum tonight, I will be your personal VJ. That means I'll be running the projector that you see behind our speakers. I will be trying to answer questions that are tweeted to me, and I will hopefully be finding some interesting and relevant facts online. If you don't feel like walking all the way up to the microphone and waiting your turn to talk, or you're feeling a little shy, please feel free to tweet your question to us. So for once, I'm not going to ask you to turn off your phones. When you tweet, if you could do @FordHallForum, and then put your question in and send it, then I will get it. I'd like to thank our generous sponsors of the Ford Hall Forum, including, among others, the Lowell Institute, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the Barr Foundation, the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, and of course our partners at Suffolk University, which serves as our home base. The forum also thanks our members, without whom we would not be able to operate. So if you enjoy these forums, please become a member. You'll find an envelope for membership right inside the brochure. Our moderator for this evening is Skip Parham. Skip is the Director of Marketing at cable networks NECN and Comcast Sportsnet, where he coordinates the promotional use of social media. Skip holds degrees from the Mass College of Liberal Arts and Emerson College and has nearly 20 years of experience managing communications for some of the largest consumer brands in America, including Sam Adams, Krispy Kreme, and Sprint PCS. Skip is also an adjunct professor at Suffolk University, and he serves as the clerk on the Ford Hall Forum board. Please give a big hand to Skip Parham.
Is that my cue?
That's your cue.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. It is an honor for me to host this or moderate this panel tonight. It is the first time I've moderated a panel at the Ford Hall Forum, such an esteemed organization, and I'm proud to serve as the clerk, and thank you all very much for attending this panel. As Jen said, it's a tragedy in that we have to have a panel on this topic, but it certainly is fascinating. And as the Director of Marketing at two cable networks, part of the NBC family, I use social media, and I think these guys will be much more of an expert than I am, because I use social media a lot for promotional purposes, and I'm not really sure that's what it's intended for. But most often, if you were to follow me, you'd get some announcement about programming that NECN is doing or CSN is doing. So I'm not sure that's the real intention of it, but as a marketing person, I'm still trying to figure it out. But these guys, I think, will have much, much more expertise. Before I introduce our panel, just to set this up, and again to refer back to NBC and our networks, we spent a lot of energy and time last year after the Olympics promoting that the London Olympics were the first social media Olympics, and that there were more users of hashtags and more people going to Facebook and following Twitter accounts than had ever been used before in any Olympic Games. And as I was reading through some of the coverage, a lot of it which I found on Adam's site, Washington Post story in particular, it had mentioned how Boston Police Chief Ed Davis had really learned a lot from the London bombings, and particularly the need to acquire as much video footage as possible. from just the myriad of surveillance cameras that were around the city. And I think London is pretty wired in terms of cameras, much more so than Boston. But in thinking about that, it really came to me that this was really the first social media, for lack of a better term, terrorist attack. The London bombings, I think, really predated the real use of Twitter, the birth of Twitter, right? There wasn't Twitter around at that time. Hashtags, the advent of camera phones, they're ubiquitous these days. So I think he learned very quickly, and Cheryl, I'm sure, can attest, that there was perhaps a wealth of footage out there that they could mine, but there were some challenges in doing that. And how do you acquire all that? How do you sift through it? And then maybe how do you analyze what's being posted without being sent? So I think that's the interesting piece of this, and I think this hopefully we'll get to that. My hope is we'll start kind of at a 30,000-foot level and then get more granular and get into some specific events. But I'll be monitoring that Twitter as well, not that Twitter, monitoring Twitter as well. And I'll take questions. If I see something, I'll ask questions from that as well. So just to introduce our panel, I'm going to try to pull up my notes here. We have three panelists, and I think Garrett is coming right now.
Welcome.
No rush, no rush. Sorry, so let me introduce them, and we can get right into this. And I think we'll take questions at about 7:15 or so. First, to my immediate left is Cheryl Fiandaca. And Cheryl is the Bureau Chief, Public Information for the Boston Police Department. She serves as the department spokesperson. Her department is responsible for managing the BP News blog, their Twitter account, as well as their Facebook page. She's taught at Emerson College and other universities. She served as a reporter at WCVB here in Boston, as well as WCBS and WABC in New York. She, in fact, was working for WABC during the terrorist attacks of 9/11 in 2001, so she has that interesting perspective from then and now. She won a Peabody Award for her 9/11 coverage, and you can follow her at Cheryl Fiandaca. Next to Cheryl is Adam Gaffin, and if you're not familiar with the Universal Hub site, the blog, you should. I think it's one of the most interesting sites out there, locally based. Adam is the founder of that. He's the editor of Universal Hub, which I think he'll describe it, but is a community news and information site, and is really based on the premise that residents can keep themselves informed. Through the advent of social media, they can keep themselves informed about what's going on any given day. If you were to go to Universal Hub, you could see what's going on in any neighborhood from Upham's Corner to Kendall Square. So a very fascinating site. He's been posting on that site since 2005. He set up his first internet site back in 1993 for some community newspaper, I think. I don't know which one, but a way back one in 1993 when I think only AOL existed at that time.
And Prodigy.
And Prodigy, that's right. I think my mother had Prodigy, as a matter of fact. Prodigy was the leader at one time, was it not? Right. Yes, exactly.
15 free hours.
Yes. Yes, exactly. He's a consultant to media organizations and startups seeking to develop their own community news sites, and he also coordinates the Boston Blog Network. You can follow Adam at Universal Hub. And last but not least is Garrett Quinn. Garrett literally jumped off a plane arriving from China. How long did you spend in China?
About 2 weeks, 12 days, 2 weeks.
2 weeks, 12 days. And I think as not as a sideshow, but you bring Wally. Do you bring Wally and the Green Monster with you? And Wally visits the sites around China and wherever else Garrett travels.
I've been since high school. I've been taking this little miniature Wally the Green Monster all over the world. So I've got photos. Here's Wally in front of the Coliseum. Here's Wally with the Pope. Here's Wally, at the Eiffel Tower. Here's Wally, passed out in Vegas. I do, all over the
So what you've learned is Wally has been more places than I have. But I'm sure what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, at least according to Wally. Garrett is a contributor to Reason Magazine. He's a weekend editor at Mediaite. He writes the Less is More blog for Boston.com. And he writes for wicked local papers, including the Watertown Tab. So it has some interesting perspective on the events surrounding the bombing or following the bombing. He was on site at the initial attack in the Boylston Street area after the first hours of the investigations. You can follow Garrett at Garrett Quinn, and that's 2 R's, 2 T's, and 2 N's, at Garrett Quinn. Okay? Did I get anything wrong?
No.
Okay. Good. So let's start. Let's start at that 30,000-foot level, and get these guys' perspective on social media's role. I think they each have a unique perspective, and then maybe get into some of the specifics or specific events, the timeline, not timelines, but the little data points that happened as we, as what was an amazing week. And I know it's gone beyond a week, but what an amazing week it was from the Monday through the Friday. Pretty incredible, the speed in which the Boston police and the FBI wrapped up their investigation, or went through that investigation and came out with some suspects and an arrest. But so let's start with the broader question. 1 month out and at that 30,000-foot level, what is your opinion, and we'll start you, Cheryl, on social media as an asset, a hindrance, or something more nefarious throughout the process?
Well, for the Boston Police Department, I think it was a tremendous asset. I inherited an infrastructure. The commissioner is very focused on social media, and he really sees the value in it, so he's really put a lot of resources into it, and that was very fortunate, because had I had to open an account, a Twitter account, on the day of the bombings, it would have been very difficult. The day of the bombings, we had about 54,000 followers. We were already breaking news on our blog and using Twitter to kind of feed the blog and back and forth kind of thing. So a lot of media folks were already used to the way we were handling getting word out about certain events that were happening in the city. So when the bombings hit, one of the biggest problems, the same exact problem during September 11th, was communication. A lot of phone calls were dropping out. I was off that day. My phone kept dropping out. I saw that I had a lot of calls. And when I finally got a call, it was from one of my nieces who said, "What's going on at the marathon?" My sister was running. And she said, "There's bombs." And so I called. I kept trying to get through. So finally I got through to our command center and got patched through to the commissioner, who said, "We've just got to get people away from this area so we can get first responders in and be able to get the ambulances out." So the only way I had to let people know what was going on would be to use Twitter. So I started tweeting. And actually, my 17-year-old niece was doing the tweeting because I was driving. So thank goodness I was with her, not one of my older sisters, because I don't know how it all would have turned out. But she was very well versed in Twitter, so I just kept saying, tweet this, tweet this. And so she was doing that. And so the initial tweets were, to tell people to get away from the area, to let first responders get through, to let people know we did have 2 explosions at the marathon. But in those first few minutes, we weren't exactly sure what those explosions were all about. But we needed to let people know what was happening. I mean, when things like this go on, there's a lot of fear. So if you can give people information, they can at least understand what's happening. And this was the fastest way for me to get the information out to the biggest audience. So that's how it all started.
5 years ago, how would you have communicated? What would have been your first point of contact, or your first info stream out to the public?
I think it would have been really difficult. It probably would have been, kind of the old-fashioned way. There were calls coming in, but the problem was we had to tell her, the phone service was a real problem. So we would have tried to post things on Facebook, which, 5 years ago, I don't know how many people would have been. We have a Facebook page, and we have a blog, so we probably would have been posting there, but in all honesty, our site crashed within the first couple of hours. Our blog crashed, because so many people were being driven to it. We went from 54,000 followers before the bombing to, within 3 hours, over 100,000. So that's how fast people were trying to get information about what was going on.
You just stole my next question.
Oh, sorry.
How many followers did you gain
Well,
with that?
over 300,000.
Over 300,000.
Right.
Adam, Cheryl brought up a point about phones crashing, and I think, truthfully, one of the first, not erroneous reports, but one of the first reports that I saw on Twitter was that the telephone companies had shut down wireless service in fear that some of these bombs had been detonated with remote devices via cell phone. I don't think that ever turned out to be correct, Cheryl. Maybe you could,
No, that's
you
not
could
true.
touch on that. But so Adam, I mean, that's, within the first couple hours, I'm not sure when that happened, but that's how fast something can get out there.
Yeah, in fact, I was at home that day because, I have to admit, my daughter is not into the marathon. So we went downtown for some Paul Revere type stuff. They have the ride in the North End and everything. And I was posting photos of like Ray Flynn running in the marathon in '83 or whatever it was. The bombs went off at 2:50. At 2:51, somebody tweeted, what was that cannon sound on Boylston Street? A minute later, somebody else said, what's that sound in Kenmore, Boylston Street? So it was amazing that the people, their first reaction is like, something's just blown up, and they're getting on their phones and tweeting. And then obviously, not because the phone companies were shutting things down, but they were overloaded probably. Misinformation like that, it happens. The power of the medium, though, is that those things are corrected pretty quickly, or can be corrected pretty quickly. And you can get to the more important business of trying to tell people what was going on. I'm not the Boston Globe. I didn't have reporters there. I didn't have, it's me. I'm literally sitting on my couch with like 2 scanners going. The Channel 5 was on, and all those tweets are coming in. You can collect stuff like that. People, I think within 10 minutes, somebody had posted a photo which became known as the man on the roof photo, which showed the second explosion with this like big orange, sort of ballooning thing out. And he just tweeted this photo, and it was like, that would not have happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Everybody's a reporter now. The challenge is doing something with
So
that.
you said that was within minutes, because I
Yes.
have a 12-year-old and very social media savvy, more I guess Instagram than, and I always want to call it picturegram. That seems to me more natural for what it is, but Instagram. And that night she had said, "Look at this," and I said, "It's a marathon. There are people partying all over the place. Probably some guy on a roof deck, having a good time." But you're saying that was up within minutes, that photo of who is this guy?
Well, no, the who was this guy thing was the most immediate part of the photo was the explosion. And in fact, when I posted it on my site, I actually cropped it out just to show the explosion. But then people started looking at the whole photo and said, "My God, there's a guy up on the roof." Within a few hours also, I live in Rosendale, and one of the things that happened in Rosendale at the last marathon was there was a series of unexplained explosions or booms that went on for about a year. All of a sudden, I'm getting all these tweets from people in Rosendale. Do you think they're related? Especially when the news came out that it was they were pressure cookers, because you hear these booms. And I'll be honest. I actually sent links to those stories to the FBI, that FBI email box that they had set up, because people kept saying, "You got to let them know." Fortunately for Rosendale, it turned out there's no connection, but people are reporting what's going on around them, and they're remembering things, and they're trying to make connections. There are good sides to that and bad sides. The bad sides are what happened with one part of Reddit, where they were trying to out people. The good sides are you bring people together. The Globe set up a spreadsheet where you could just sign up and say, "I want to help, and here's what I want to do." And it was this amazing thing. Thousands of people were signing up. That, I think, shows the power of this medium. It's something that wouldn't have happened that quickly a few years ago.
I want to ask you about synthesizing information and the power of it, what you do, but I want to work Garrett into this conversation. Garrett, from what I read on your posts or your Twitter, your tweets, the day of the bombing, it looked like you were on a train on the way into the marathon for whatever revelry you might have, and then you either lose service at one time, and then you get off and you walk into a situation where you're a reporter, a blogger, and there's a news event. So what was your first step social media-wise when you figured out there was something going on?
Well, I had the day off. It was Patriots Day, and like everybody else, I was celebrating in one way or another. And I was actually on my way down to go to the poorhouse actually on Boylston Street. But I was writing up a couple pitches at my house, and I was leaving late, and like usual. And I grabbed my camera going out the door, just because I was like, we're gonna be at a bar, it'll be fun. I'll take pictures of us being idiots, and that'll be great. And I grabbed my phone charger as I was leaving, which is like sort of this like natural instinct I picked up over the years. And I was on the Green Line on my way to Copley when a friend of mine in D.C. of all places actually hit me up on GChat. She was like, "Hey, are you?" And she's another reporter, and she said, "Are you at the marathon?" I said, "No, I'm on my way down there." And, why? What's up? She's like, "Oh, there's been a bombing." I'm like, "That's not funny. Like, why would you say that?" She's like, "No, really, there was." And what was my first instinct? I checked Twitter, and I immediately I saw reports of explosions and things like that. I didn't immediately know it was a bombing because I couldn't see footage or video of it, but I saw the two explosions. And then they kicked everybody off the train, and I put two and two together. I went upstairs, I grabbed a cab, and I went on my way down as close as I could get to Copley. You couldn't get right in there, so I ended up on the next one over is not, it's Newbury, I think, it's next to Boylston, the next street over on Boylston. And then, I just went from there. I was in, full reporter mode at that. I mean, I didn't have all my tools of the trade with me, but your phone in 2013 can do almost everything you need anyway. It acts as a recorder, as a camera. So it got the job done. It wasn't perfect, but it gets the job done. I know some reporters like to use their phone as their recording device. I don't. I like to have a separate device, as I once lost an entire interview on my phone because the battery died. It was just a nightmare. Anyway, long story short is I've divided things up due to quality. So, and I went down there and I just started reporting. I think that's actually one of the great things about Twitter is its use as a tool in in journalism, particularly in breaking news. I don't think there's any tool that's better at it than at reporting breaking news than Twitter, and because it has its limitations. You can't do a 10,000 word deep dive on the probation corruption in the probation department, but you can say, hey, I am at X, Y, and Z Street. This place is on fire. Here's a photo, and then keep it up to date every couple of minutes or so. Just punch out interviews or whatever you're seeing. It's very good that way. It's very, very useful as a breaking news tool. It is not very useful to do long form stuff, but for a breaking news event like the terrorist attacks, it is perfect for to communicate with. I can't even remember how we did things before. I can't even imagine how we would have reported something like that before, or where I would have. I guess I would have turned on television. Mm-hmm. But I was out in public, so I could get it on my phone immediately. I can't even imagine how we would have done something like this before the advent of social media.
Well, that is going to lead me to my next question, but I do see that on Twitter, some folks are posting. If you do want to use a hashtag, I think you can use the hashtag Ford Hall Forum or hashtag FHF. But I do see that when I looked at hashtag FHF, there's some fitness thing out there too. So I would advocate you use the hashtag Ford Hall Forum, since that's about us. So people are tweeting and stuff, so that's pretty cool. This is, I think, something new we're going to try to do more with the forum, is the social media VJ, DJ, as well as incorporate Twitter. So in terms of how we do things now, that really strikes to Cheryl to what you do, and you touched upon it in your initial reaction. But so what was your role in using social media throughout this week? I mean, you talked about how critical it was. It was the quickest way to get information out. But tell us what you did during the week and what you were doing.
Well, I do want to say one thing. My reporter instincts kicked in that day, and all the tweets were just me reporting what I knew, and what we could tell people about the explosions, how many people were injured, how many people we knew were dead. And part of it was to get the information out and let people know what was happening and how serious it was. And also it was to correct misinformation, because at that point, a lot of outlets were reporting, we had 21 people dead and there were more bombs.
New York Post, I think, right? New York Post had some really terrible information.
Yes.
We'll talk about credible versus non-credible in a little bit.
But it was a good way to sort of correct that information, to let people know what was happening, and to sort of empower them to be able to say, well, if I go to the Boston Police Twitter account, I can see everything that's going on. I don't have to wait for a media outlet to report to me what is happening. I can get it right from the source. So that's what we tried to do throughout that week. So between correcting misinformation about whether or not we had a suspect in custody, I was sitting in my office and I'm watching news outlet after news outlet, because we have all these TVs reporting that we had a suspect in custody, and I start to second guess myself. I'm like, wow, maybe they forgot to tell me. And I'm thinking, I really don't think so, but anything's possible. So I called the commissioner. I'm like, we really don't have a suspect in custody, do we? He said, no. So we tweeted out, no suspect in custody. So we kind of, cut that off. So before, they had helicopters up circling the courthouse, and I'm watching this thing. I'm like, oh my God, this is really bad. So we had an opportunity to do that. And then during the manhunt, we put out the photos. We're empowering people, saying, hey, if you know who these people are, if you think you know who they are, here's a way you can help and get involved. And those things got tweeted a zillion times. And then also during the manhunt, we had media outlets from all over the world here, and many of them may not have known, what the general protocol is, that if it's an active scene and police officers are going door to door doing a grid search, you don't want to give up the location and say, they're at 42 Franklin Street. You can say they're in this area, but you don't want to give up the street address. And some people didn't realize that, and so they're tweeting out and giving out the street address. So we tweeted out, don't give up the location where police officers are going door to door and jeopardize their safety and public safety. So people responded to that, and they stopped doing it. So we were, pretty successful with all of that. And then, when we did capture the suspect in the boat, and we put out the famous tweet, which I think was the second most tweeted tweet other than President Obama winning the election. So it was pretty amazing how quickly that tweet and all the others got retweeted, which is amazing all around. But that's what we found it was so valuable for.
Was there, and one thing you talked about, the comments about a suspect had been captured midweek. I think it's important to note that was a mainstream media report. That wasn't social media driven. That wasn't some thread on Reddit. It was a mainstream reporter, very well respected reporter, a Boston native, I think, who first came out with that report. So it's interesting that, look, you can blame a lot of people for a lot of different things along the way, but.
One thing I wanted to say about that is, people said to me, well, why didn't you say, the report is wrong? And I, I've been on the other side, and it's really, you're under a lot of pressure in these situations to come up with sources and to report information first. And, that's a whole conversation about being first and being right and what's really more important at the end of the day. But, I didn't think we needed to say anyone was wrong. We just needed to say what was right.
I want to add to that too, because I think one thing that social media, particularly Twitter, has created since it's really taken off since the 2008 election, really 2012. But what's really happened is we no longer live in a 24-hour news cycle. We live and because of social media, we live in a 15-minute news cycle. So to watch, maybe half hour, but I'm going to go with 15, because you watch the rise and fall of stories and retractions, and if you just watch the arc of these stories, it is amazing. It was amazing how quickly it became, they caught somebody, the cop, this is over, they captured them, and how it's just like wildfire. And then it's, NBC, I think it was Pete Williams, was like, no, they're wrong. The Globe, Janet Wu, a bunch of people were just like, yes. I think actually Janet Wu might have been before John King, actually, but a lot of people were out essentially saying that, they had captured them, and there were people that were saying no, and within maybe a couple of hours, it was within less than an hour or so, it was over. So it wasn't, the lifespan of this was just, it was chewed up and spit out because of social media, I think, more so than anything else. And you wouldn't see this in an era when Twitter wasn't around. Stories would fester. You'd have to wait until the next day to get a retraction. It wouldn't be within minutes where everybody would see it. I think that's really another example of how social media has just totally flipped the sandbox over.
Adam, you said in our pre-meeting call that social media, you mentioned it here, social media is great about quickly correcting things or getting word out when things are wrong. And clearly in this case they did that. But my next question was, has social media, are citizen journalists modern day vigilantes?
No, they're not. What you have out there, first of all, citizen journalists or people with phones and cameras and stuff are not chasing after people, sticking microphones in their faces. They're not sitting on people's front porches. They're not going through people's trash. There's certain advantages to that. But are they vigilantes? No, everybody out there now has a camera, almost everybody. and everybody is very intensely aware of what's going on in the sort of, bubbles maybe not the right word, but the area around them. And they want to report that. A lot of people they see something, they want to tell somebody about it. The problem is a lot of times they don't know what it is they're seeing. So that's where it gets on the Twitter and it percolates. And, like yesterday, for example, it has nothing to do with the marathon, but people start seeing all these police going down the street. They don't know why. Well, I happen to have a scanner, so I know it's 2 people got shot. It's sort of a group journalism where people are trying to figure out the story. As vigilantes, though, I think most people, not everybody, but most people are willing to accept if they're wrong about something. And, if you say, no, this didn't happen. I mean, last night, in fact, with this shooting, I got the address wrong initially, but I corrected it. So that, again, plays into the advantage of the medium. So anyway, to answer your question, no.
Gary, you look like you had an
Yeah,
opinion
no,
on that?
I think when we're talking about vigilantes and citizen journalists, I think we have to make a distinction here, because I think what occurred with sites like Reddit in particular, where everybody suddenly, anybody who had a bag and looked remotely out of place suddenly became enemy number one. You saw that with the New York Post splashing those 2 kids that were those two kids who had track bags and happened to be fit the profile what people think as terrorists, and it turns out they were actually runners. I think one of the kids was actually a track star that they interviewed and was like, I want to run the marathon one day, blah 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 blah, and these kids, I wouldn't be surprised. I just, there was an element at that thread. And I'll say this, of course I looked at it because it was fascinating to watch this sort of this hunt take place, and all these people think they could find things. And then you had the conspiracy theorists, you talk about the man on the roof photo, and then there were guys with bags, and, then you get the Alex Jones types who, So, I think, there is an element, I think, of vigilantism on the internet, but I don't think I would necessarily lump them in with citizen journalists. There's a difference between, I think, going out there, as you said, with your camera phone, with a notepad, reporting what you're seeing, versus just posting something up on the internet, just posting crap up against the wall on the internet and saying, hey, this looks like this might be the guy, and then having people pick it out. There's some overlap there, though. This sort of crowdsourcing, decentralization that you were talking about. But I think there is a distinct difference between incriminating people just by them looking remotely suspicious. I think even on the Reddit page, they had people would circle things with like red circles, being like, "Look, there's a sag in this bag. Maybe that's a bomb." Like just really just guesswork. So.
And I'd like to say a word in defense of Reddit. Not that part of Reddit, but one of the things I think has been lost in this whole discussion is that Reddit is not this big monolithic thing. Reddit has millions of users across the country. They're not all conspiracy nuts. And there's a very active Reddit, what they call subreddit in Boston. They were not looking for backpacks. They were not circling things in red. They were telling people, where the memorial services are, where to collect money to donate to I think even before the One Fund, how can you help? So it's not like, just like the internet is not a monolith, social networks on it are not monoliths.
Well, SMC Crisis PR said it brought people together. It shows the power of the medium. That wouldn't have happened a few years ago. And one thing that I had come across, and again, Adam, this was posted on your site, and my question is this an example of the best of what social media can do in a monumental event like this, where there's lots of information, a lot of things going on? If you're familiar with the Jeff Bauman story, the gentleman who lost both his legs, one of the stories that I had read, again posted on Adam's blog, was his father actually learned that his son was okay, had survived the bombing, but was critically injured, was through a post on Facebook. And I think Jen has the photo there, and what he saw was a very graphic photo of his son Jeff with one limb already missing, a portion of one limb already missing, and damage to another leg. He got a call from his stepdaughter who said, did you see Jeff? And he's like, no, go to Facebook. and that's where he learned. So is sharing the story as it happens the best of what social media, or is that what social media does best?
That's a good question. It's one of the things it does best. That story is actually a great example of how old media, if you can call it that, did an excellent job, because that was originally a New York Times story. And they tied it all together. You know, they found Carlos Arredondo, they found this guy, the father and everything. But what makes it like a local story especially is if anybody who spends any time in JP knows who Carlos is. He's there, or Rosendale. You know, he's a local guy. The connections that you can create. You know, one of the things I was trying to do through the week is, obviously the Globe is going to do a much better job at covering the actual investigation. They have, you know, zillions of reporters and photographers. What I was trying to do was life continued in the rest of the city. People were suffering, you know, because we are a small town. Everybody, even if, like, I didn't know anybody who was injured or killed, but I knew people who knew people. You know, it's like we're one step away from everybody who's connected. What's going on in the outer neighborhoods? Even during the lockdown, you know, what was going, people were sending me photos of like empty streets and downtown Crossing and whatnot. And when one guy in West Roxbury, he hears an ice cream truck, you know, going through the neighborhood before the lockdown was officially lifted, you know, people, there were different things going on. And I think you're right, that is one of the good things about social media, is sharing that community. You know, you're sort of grieving online, but you're also trying to get over it, or trying to deal with it.
Garrett, you were down there, and you were sharing the story as it happened. Would you agree that's one of the things that social media does best?
Yeah, I would. I think social media, one of the advantages of it is the instantaneous communication of who, what, when, where, and why. If you, as a journalist, you know, of course, we can use it to vent and complain and do other things. But I think, you know, as a tool in the journalism toolkit, it is one of the best things. But also for the public at large. You know, I mean, that's one of the things that Adam is just a master at. I've jokingly called, you know, his site, you know, it's like a good Drudge Report. You know, it's like this aggregator of like everything that's going on in Boston, and he cuts and sort of, you know, puts it together and does a very good job of it, but without sort of the hysterical, you know, crazy race baiting that Drudge does. You know, just the really awfulness of that site. But he does a really good job of that. You know, curating from the blogs and Twitter. And I think, you know, one of the things that was amazing about watching this unfold on Twitter was also watching it unfold on Facebook too, because I know we're talking all, you know, the Facebook sort of it's a lot more clunky than Twitter, and it's a lot slower than Twitter. It's not this sort of like second by second update as opposed to Facebook. It's like every couple of 15 minutes or so, there's this slew of photos and things, and it's, you know, it has the same, you know, geo-tagging mechanisms that Twitter does and Instagram has. But I think, you know, you did sort of see, like, he was talking about the photos you saw from everything being closed down, and people, I don't know if it was your site or somebody else that just collected this series of photos of just this eerie Boston just dead in broad daylight, and it was just fascinating to see that. And I think social media allows us to do that in a very rapid pace, that without, you know, to just, you know, because you can search for all these specific terms and other things. You know, I did something similar, like after the bombing. I was wondering what, during the lockdown, I was wondering what, you know, MIT has a radio station, and I was wondering, well, hey, what were they doing during all this thing? So I went through and I looked and I went through their archives, and I know, you know, that's how I found the story of this DJ over there, because people tweeted, hey, there's this guy at WMBR who's been on the air for like 8 hours and he can't leave, and you know, bring him food, please, you know, like he can't get out. And I figured, I listen to WMBR pretty regularly, but it was by, you know, culling through all this, you know, part of the term, but all this crap that is on Twitter, and there is a lot of it. I found this really fascinating story of this guy who got, you know, locked in at WMBR and had to do 4 different radio shows instead of his normal one. And, you know, so he had to do an oldie show, a punk show, an indie show, and then he had to do a jazz show. And then he just, you know, at one point he just ran out of records, so he was just pulling things off the shelf to play because he didn't know anything at one point.
Well, I'm glad you brought it to Friday and the events that happened on that Friday, because I want to bring it back to Cheryl. and I'm not asking you to give away, I guess, strategy or details on the investigation, but you've spent an extensive amount of time, the FBI, the Boston Police have spent an exhaustive amount of time combing through photos from surveillance cameras, photos sent by the public based on the call to action by the police. You have two individuals you think are, interesting. At a minimum, you want to at least talk to them. You make the decision to release those photos. I guess in a couple of years ago, you'd give them to the news media, the TV stations. They'd get in the newspaper the next day. Maybe you print wanted posters. I don't know. But now you say, we're going to get them out there, and we know it's just going to go like wildfire. It's going to go through social media. Was there a strategy behind that? Was there a need to do that at that time and place because of things were happening on social media that were erroneous? Or was that, the deliberate strategy, let's get it out there now and go?
It didn't have anything to do with social media. It had to do with, the investigation in general. Minutes after the investigation, the commissioner realized that there's probably a lot of video out there. I mean, that street, first of all, it was the marathon, so you knew that you had a lot of photographers there. You had a lot of media there, mainstream media, because it's an international race. And we also knew that we had a lot of businesses. It's a very busy district, so a lot of those businesses have cameras, and we knew people were there with cameras videotaping people who may have been running. So we put out a tweet asking for all of the video. That took days to go through. I mean, my office was we were overwhelmed with how many people were calling and emailing and saying, we've got pictures, where do we put them and where do we send them? So the FBI set up an email account so that people could send all those pictures in. And then actually the police department, along with the FBI and the state police, went to a warehouse with all of these videos and set up all of these rooms where they viewed frame by frame by frame and brought experts in to look at the videos, because it wasn't just the moment that the bomb went off. It was, the minutes before that, and then backtracking from when, okay, you see this guy appearing to put down a bag. Where was he 30 seconds ago? Where was he a minute ago? Where was he 2 minutes ago? And that video and going through all of that and isolating the people in those particular areas really took a long time. And, I felt like it was an episode of 24, though, I have to say. It was from the time the bombs went off to the time we find the guy in the boat was like one whole day. And so there was a lot of discussion as to whether or not it was a good idea to put the pictures out. They had isolated these two people, and they felt confident that if they had maybe a few more days, they'd be able to sort of get more information, be able to figure out who these guys were. I think the commissioner's biggest concern was the safety of the people of Boston, and we had a lot of major events coming up that weekend, sporting events and everything else, and if these two guys were running around putting bombs out, who knew where they were going to go next? So that's really what fueled the decision to put it out, and we were setting up the news conference, and just before the news conference, I tweeted out the pictures, and within 3 minutes, I think they were tweeted like 10,000 times. I mean, it just went crazy, viral. And interestingly enough, there were some tips that came in, but no one identified them. So, I mean, we didn't have any idea who they were until they shot the cop and hijacked the car.
How quickly, did you have any expectation about, we'll get this out and, we'd get information? I mean,
Yeah.
did you reasonably expect that within 5 hours, you knew not only, I guess, the names of the suspect, but their location and were, on the hunt?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of tips came into the tip line, but no one identified them, which was kind of surprising considering, after it was all over, we saw the text message from the friend of the suspect who said, "Looks like you, LOL," on a text message, but he never called. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of curious since, some of the pictures that we even put out later, people didn't identify them and call them in.
What were your guys' thoughts? Well, you're out there in the blogosphere. They send out the pictures. Do you feel like you have a civic responsibility to do something with them? I mean, they were out there anyway, but how did you take it when those photos finally came out?
Well, unfortunately, I did miss your tweet. So I was sitting, the FBI site had crashed as they were doing the press conference. So I was sitting in front of my TV with a camera taking a screen capture off the TV, which I put up until I could get the actual pictures. It's news. You know, these are these two guys who just committed this horrible thing. How could we not run them? You know, it's like, yes, it was a civic responsibility, but it's also like, my God, I mean, you know, if you see these guys, like, call this number. So.
Yeah, you know, the thing that was amazing to watch was how just quickly that spread. And you said it was something like 10,000 times. Yeah, and I remember the FBI site crashing and sort of just watching it, it come in on social media, people saying it's crashed. Because, you know, and I was sort of working on different stories at the time, but I remember, and then when that came out, it just sort of dropped everything that became it. But the reaction to that was stunning, just stunning to watch the amount of traffic. You know, to crash the FBI's website, that takes a lot of traffic.
They crashed ours like
okay,
3
yeah.
or 4 times.
Yeah.
So.
We're definitely open for questions, so if you have questions, you can go to either Mike.
I've got one by tweet, if we can
Okay.
read that out. Is it proper for me to say the person's name? I'm going to go ahead and out the person. Liz Mineo asks, could Cheryl tell us the story behind the famous tweet, suspect in custody, who, when, where?
I can. We were all listening to the radio, and we were listening to what was going on, and it was kind of like, I was like being Hillary Clinton in that famous picture where she's like, only I wasn't like that. But it was really pretty amazing to listen to it, and you know, your heart's pounding because someone had an open mic, and I know people misinterpreted what that was that they could hear. And open mic meant that someone's microphone, a police officer who was at the scene, was open, and that meant that if anybody talked during that time, it would be broadcast out, so everybody would hear it, including the suspect, presumably, that was in the boat. So if you were trying to, you know, get there and be quiet, that was an important point to make sure your mic was not open. So that was one of the things. And so finally, you know, we're listening to the whole thing, and they're bringing in the, you know, the tank thing that's going to take off the tarp of the boat, and you know, everybody's thinking they don't know if he's got bombs in there or guns. I mean, we really just didn't have any idea at that point. You know, the helicopter's up, and we're looking at the infrared thing that the helicopter has, which is really cool, so you can see him.
Is there a live feed of that infrared?
We had a live feed.
You had a
we
live
did.
feed of
yeah.
that.
So you could see the infrared, and it's crazy. So you really didn't know what to expect. I mean, my nephew was on the SWAT team that was there. So for me, I was like, oh my God, don't let this kid get shot. So, I mean, you just didn't know what was going on. So while this is all happening, and so finally, you know, they surround the boat, and he's being, you know, they're negotiating with him, and he stands up, and they tell him to come off the boat, and he says he can't, and they get him off the boat, and my nephew's the one who says suspects in custody, oddly enough. And, you know, we all started clapping because we were so relieved. And there was an officer in my office, Jamie Keneally, who was also listening to the radio, and he tweeted out suspect captured, and that famous tweet, which was just great. So he did more of I mean, I wasn't the only one tweeting. I have people that are in the office, some police officers and a few civilians, and they all tweet, and everybody did such a great job. I mean, we didn't really have any missteps, and a lot of his tweets were really heartfelt, you know, about hugging your kids when the police officers came home at night, and it was just, it was a nice juxtaposition between getting out the facts and correcting information and public safety stuff, and then just putting out some other things that were had a little more emotion to them. So that's how that all happened.
Well, I'm glad you talked about the open mic and the radio, because that's certainly a question that I had. And this one's directed at Adam, but Garrett, maybe you have an opinion too. I saw this particularly on Friday and maybe earlier in the week, but I saw it multiple times. Just a simple tweet that the scanner is not news. And you know, whether people had a penchant for listening to the scanner, which you can get a live feed of that over the internet, and then you're just running with it on Twitter and posting things based on what they hear on the scanner. But I know, Adam, you're an active listener of the scanner, as is every news station in the city. Any news station, any newspaper worth its salt it has a scanner and listens to it. But talk to us about the scanner, I guess, in this day of instant gratification.
One of the things I've learned with the scanner is you have to listen for a couple minutes because, you know, police are like everybody else. They get to a scene, they don't necessarily know what's going on at that moment. They're announcing stuff. It may be totally wrong. You know, I don't know who announced it, but at some point, I think it was Thursday night, somebody went on the police radio with the names of that Brown student and some other person. And that, you know, I was asleep at that point, so I didn't tweet that, but there were other people tweeting this stuff. But one of the things I've noticed, to be honest with the scanner, is if you listen, the police tend to, there's a narrative that goes on, and it corrects itself. Just like Twitter is self-correcting, the police communications are self-correcting. So if you listen for a few minutes, you know, maybe they got the street wrong, but then they'll get it right. And it's not, you know, I'm not criticizing the police or anything, it's just the way it is. So I've learned to maybe hold off, you know, for a few minutes before I tweet something on the scanner. I have to admit, the one time I made an exception to that was when I heard that. I didn't know it was your nephew, but, you know, you could hear it on the scanner, suspect in custody. And I admit it, I instantly tweeted that out. And right away, people started tweeting at me, where's this from? Where did you get this from? Well, it was the police scanner. At that point, I felt pretty confident because this thing had been going on for several hours that, you know, they really had the guy in custody.
Garrett, you had something?
You know, the scanner. You know, my wife is here and she'll tell you I listen to Scanner all the time. She hates it because one of the things, and I have like the real scanner in my car and in my truck, and the thing that in my house, and the thing that's kind of terrible about listening to it on a traditional scanner is no matter how finely tuned you have it, you'll still get, you know, really horrible noises occasionally when it's going through all the, because I forget how many frequencies there are in Boston, because there's the special ones and then there's a DPW and there's all these additional ones that I've programmed into both of them. And occasionally when it's going through the, you know, its cycle, it'll stop on some of the stations. It'll just be like, you know, just like really awful, just, you know, screechy noises that are horrible to hear. But you know, the issue of the scanner, I think, is really interesting because it goes back to sort of how Twitter has decentralized things, and you did see so many people tweeting out. You know, people I know that aren't journalists that were just tweeting out every single thing that came up on the scanner. And you know, as a journalist, you know, we have to you know, they have to exercise restraint. And I give you one great example of this. When we were in the Watertown lockdown, when we were sort of bunkered in that little area where they, you know, where all the media that were following it from the beginning, sort of over by the Arsenal Mall. I had the scanner on the whole time when I wasn't out making phone calls or doing something else, interviewing people or whatever. And the thing about the scanner, I had, you know, because there were some other journalists that didn't have any place to go, but they didn't have scanners in their cars or whatever, but I did, so it doesn't suck your battery either because I just had it running. So we're in there and we're listening to the scanner, and there's a couple other reporters there, and they're talking about this. You know, so a call comes in on the scanner. A woman in Belmont said her daughter texted her that that a man is holding her at gunpoint at her home on such and such a road, and blah blah blah. And I looked at him like, oh boy, this might be it. But, you know, I'm not going to sit there and be like, they're at Langham Road, blah blah blah, because A, that's just irresponsible, and B, you know, you can't, that's not enough to go off on. So we just waited, and, you know, I turned it off. I put my recorder down to record, so it was like this 10-minute duration of, you know, them going to the house, knocking on the door, having the woman come out, and it was incredibly suspenseful to listen to because you're just sort of waiting to, you know, A, you want to be like the guy, you know, somebody that gets the news right, but B, you know, most importantly, you want to verify that this is something that's newsworthy, that's significant. Turned out it was nothing. You know, it was, you know, in a lot of cases, in events like this, you have the oddballs come out and make, you know, there were so many things that came out over the scanner that were similar to this. There were just non-events. And if we tweeted out and reported on every single one of them, it would, you know, you'd lose credibility and be irresponsible. But so yeah, that was the big thing. But it was stunning to hear that. I think this was at like 3 in the afternoon or 2 in the afternoon. You know, and at that point you've had no sleep for, I don't know, like, you know, you're like, oh, maybe this is the end. But no, it wasn't. And that's the thing is, you know,
everybody has access to the scanner now too. It's not just like you have to go to Radio Shack and buy this $50 box and hook it up and program all the things. You can just go on the internet now and get a scan of any frequency you want in the world. So I think that's changed the game in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got 2 questions, but we'll start over here.
Sure. My question is about whether part of the success of social media after the Boston Marathon attack is because Boston is a fairly dense city. Does it require a certain population density, a certain demographic to be on Twitter? We see a mixture of broadcasters and reporters, a mixture of regular folk, a lot of regular folk because Boston is a dense area, as well as the Twitter accounts like Universal Hub. I wouldn't know that Cambridge Police had a Twitter if it weren't for Universal Hub, that sort of thing. So I'm looking at, say, out in Oklahoma where the National Weather Service out of Norman's been tweeting like crazy about tornadoes the past week. Is anyone tuning in? Is that effective? Or in my home state in Connecticut, several years back, someone sent a hoax tornado picture into the local TV station after they had said, we think there might be a tornado out in some rural area. You know, would that have been corrected by a social media in such a sparsely populated area?
I think if you had asked that question a few years ago, the answer would have been, you're right, that we're a very dense area. We're also a very technologically savvy area, you know, I mean, Boston. But a few years ago, was it 2 or 3 years ago, Hurricane Irene basically went up the Hudson Valley. And I had worked with a couple of folks who set up a website to cover the Catskills. And it was amazing to watch. Their little, at that point, it was a little website, became like the hub where they had set up one of these like live, I forget if it was Scribble or something where anybody could like live blog on there. People were looking for their neighbors, you know, they couldn't, because all the roads were blocked and everything, they were trying to coordinate help. It's not, I don't think it's a city phenomenon anymore. You know, I think everybody's online now, and even in rural areas, you're starting to see people, you take advantage of this and doing things that you couldn't do, you know, before they were there, it was newspapers and radio stations, and there's a limit to what you can do in those kind of things. Now, you know, even in mountain areas, they're doing it.
How about over here? Question over here?
I wanted to go back to the issue of the scanner for a minute and the possibility that people were listening to the scanners and tweeting things that were endangering police operations. As the person on the far end of the panel said, there were a lot of people who, instead of listening to it on something from Radio Shack, they were going to places like Wicked Local and Radio Reference to hear the scans. So I wanted to ask the woman from BPD, was there any point where the BPD thought about talking to the people who had those sites and asking them to delay or turn off those feeds? Did you think that there was enough threat to the police operations that you would have thought of doing that? And if you did, why did you end up deciding not to do that?
No, we didn't think to do that. I think the only thing that we did do is we asked media outlets by putting something out on Twitter. We tweeted out, please don't give away locations where officers are going door to door.
Right, I saw that was actually put up on the board a few minutes ago.
Yeah, so, I mean, that was the only thing we did, and actually, people did respond and they stopped doing it. So
Good.
that was the most important thing to us. We just didn't want to jeopardize officer safety or the public safety.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a dirty little secret from Boston, but Boston, as Garrett said, has a number of frequencies. I forget how many police have, but
at
it's
least
like
40, I think, including like DPW and
oh,
fire.
okay.
And
Yeah, and MBTA police. and state
MBTA,
police.
yeah.
But if you go to, I think they call it Broadcastify now. They bought Radio Reference. They have a single frequency that covers all of Boston. So if somebody's in Dorchester doing, you know, a standard breaking and entering, while that's on, you're not going to hear something in Alston. And if you really want to get into this, yeah, you have to go down to Radio Shack and buy a $50 or $100 scanner and program in the frequencies yourself.
And if you're just looking to do this as a hobby, and it's fun. I mean, from a professional standpoint, it's fun. But I'm kind of a radio nerd myself, so I enjoy these. You know, when I go on road trips, I try to program other frequencies for where I am. Even I remember
when I went up to Canada, when I went up to Quebec once last winter, I went up and they asked, "Is that a police scanner in your vehicle?" I said no, but they didn't. We're gonna come in and check it. But there are legal rules in certain states on what is valid or not. But the thing that is really, I think, has changed the game with regards to things like the scanner is how as I've said, it's not, this isn't just for journalists or sophisticated, radio geeks anymore. It's on the internet, and it's accessible on your phone. And I think that was, when I tweeted out the links to the various scanner sites because I was just getting tired of, tweeting every little detail. People wanted to go on and listen to it, they could go hear them. But the thing for me on Friday night started with listening to things on the scanner at home, because the shooting in Cambridge was just up the street from where I lived, and at first it did not appear that, because there was a robbery nearby, and okay, sounds like this was a robbery that went real bad.
That was that 7-Eleven thing that may or may not have actually happened.
Were some of the initial reports that they had knocked off the 7-Eleven?
Yeah, well,
that was robbed the 7-Eleven.
Yeah, that came.
That was actually later.
That came
because the
later.
initial
That came
scanner
later?
reports.
Yeah.
Did that ever
was-
happen, actually?
Someone else robbed
Yeah,
the
no,
7-Eleven,
there was,
didn't they?
because they broadcast a description of a
went
suspect
fair.
for the 7-Eleven. That, I forget the exact thing, but it was some big beefy guy.
Yeah, it was a big dude, and that's the thing though, is I think, and that's another thing with these types of situations with breaking news that we were talking about, sort of the self-correction mechanism. I tweeted this out a couple times, I think, throughout the days. People reminding people to take everything with a grain of salt, because just so much hearsay just gets spread around during crazy events like this. Like 9/11 is a great example. People said there was a car bomb at the State Department. There was a fifth plane, and all these things turned out to not be true. Just like that there were there were 2 additional devices. That there were 22 people dead. That the JFK library, the JFK library fire was sort of was interesting, but that turned out to be nothing. But.
Yeah, I think we had. Were you waiting for a question? And I know there is a Twitter question out there, but let's take these two and then do the Twitter question. Go ahead.
I'm interested in any of the panelists responding with thoughts on how the use of social media will change after the experience of the bombing. And in particular, I was sort of surprised that yesterday, for the first time, I got a notice from my local police with a picture of someone that they would like help identifying, who they think was involved in a local crime. First time I ever got it, and I wondered if the recent experience is changing how they want to engage us all to help.
Well, I think for police departments, that's what the Boston Police Department did, is going to change the way they operate with their communities and letting people know what's going on. And we've gotten lots of calls from other agencies, even in England, asking us what we did and how we did it, and how it all evolved. And I think you're going to see more and more of that, because I think they saw how effective it was to engage the community. You can interact with the community. Sometimes someone will tweet something and say, we see 5 police cars at this location, what's going on? And if I can look, and if I'm in my office and I can pull up what's going on out on the street, I can tweet back, it's a medical situation or whatever it is. So it's a way to directly engage with the community and to also empower them by giving them pictures and saying, this happened in your community. If you see this person, there's a number you can call to help.
Yeah, one thing that Cambridge Police is doing, which is pretty interesting, which they started before all this, they are actually tweeting events as they happen, radio calls as they happen, which is good and bad. It's the same thing as listening to the scanner, especially the last few weeks. There's been a lot of suspicious packages.
Oh my God, it's endless.
And it's like, well, maybe it's real, maybe it isn't. But it's certainly, it's an interesting thing, because not everybody wants to listen to the scanner.
They do put, the thing that's interesting about when the Cambridge does this is they put X's for the specific address, so you couldn't find out exactly where things are going on. But yeah, they started this right around the time, I think it was in early April was when they started doing this. And I don't, they're the largest police department in the country to do something like this in such a way. And I have, in fact, I remember I said that one time, because Cambridge's frequencies are slightly different for a regular scanner, and the one I have in my house isn't as good as the one I have in my car, but the one, I tweeted something like that. I said, man, there are like 5 cruisers like on the street, and I had texted two friends I have in the department too what was going on. They weren't on duty at the time, but then somebody from the department on Twitter got back to me. So.
You have a question down here?
In about 6 weeks, we've got the 4th of July on the Esplanade. Do any of you intend to be there, watching and waiting and listening for something to happen? There'll be heavy security, of course. Does the social media community, will they be coordinating their efforts and staking out various places the way big news media do?
I won't be there, but that's because our family always goes to Newton for the fireworks because you can get there 10 minutes beforehand and get a good seat. That's an interesting thing. I hadn't thought about coordinating anything. Hopefully nothing's going to happen first, but if something does, I'm going to hope that people will do what they did, a few weeks ago in terms of broadcasting what they're seeing.
Cheryl, are there lessons learned from this event that you are going to apply, without any specific details, but apply to this event? It is a major event. It's a huge event.
It's a huge event, and mercifully for us, it's on the state police because it's the Esplanade, not the Boston Police. So we'll be assisting.
Communication between.
Right. Right, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of extra security.
There was a question from Twitter, and I guess I would maybe this leans toward the conspiracy, and it's from @RevEverett. The question: what do you make of the hashtag Pray for Boston trending during the marathon? Or I guess at the beginning of the marathon in one of the least religious states. So I hadn't heard that, but
there are no atheists in foxholes. No, I don't. That's not surprising. I think people are doing that now for Oklahoma. Massachusetts definitely is one of the more secular states in the country, but it's not. It's not shocking how the people turn to God in during times of crisis, during times of stress and panic and fear. Yeah, that's a fairly, I would say, normal reaction.
question.
Yeah, thank you. Several of you talked about, we're asking what does social media do best and so forth. You talk about building connections between people, again, builds community or communities again, and a variety of things like that. Now, related to that, I'm wondering whether currently or maybe future, community, again, whether I live in Roxbury and we work hard at building community there, but anywhere around the world, Africa, whatever, community has to do with building a sense, or having a sense of mutual responsibility and accountability. And it's a very deep and profound thing. And so I'm wondering, does social media and the use of it, and again, maybe lessons learned or what we see here, is it able to build community, really? Or does it build communities of people who maybe are all experiencing some particular event or something? And that's, I would say, far from community. Is it just sort of ecstatic voyeurism on a mass scale? And this is fabulous. But in terms of sort of anywhere, whether small or large, building mutual responsibility and accountability that's any long-term at all, does it do that or no? Is that not even what it's for?
And can you be accountable to a community when you never see the person? There's no interaction, face-to-face contact. How tied into that person, that community are you if perhaps you never meet that person?
It's a very, very interesting question. I think online, maybe the feeling of community is not, community it takes a lot of work. Think of like Amish people building a house or something. It's a lot of work. Online, maybe communities are a little bit more ephemeral than that, more ad hoc. Certainly, a lot of people came together over what happened in April that are not going to do something going forward. But at the same time, in terms of supplementing what's happening in the physical world, Certainly, I think it can be a valuable thing. You know, earlier I gave the example of those folks up in the Catskills. They didn't build a community right away, but certainly the fact that they were able to help people who were physically stranded on mountaintops because the roads have been washed away or whatnot, that was certainly helping the existing community in a way that would not have been possible a few years ago. So I think, you know, you're right. Where you never touch somebody or you never actually meet them face to face, it may not be as strong a bond, but it can certainly help if you do have those bonds. You see that in neighborhood activism. You see that, you know, Boston just went through a whole process for rezoning school assignment districts. You know, I think the online discussions were often as important as what was going on in these endless meetings that they were going on for hours where, you know, people were just sort of babbling sometimes. So I don't know if that answered your question, but there is a role for it, and it can help, but it, by itself, maybe not.
Garrett?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think that's one thing that people have been asking throughout the rise of social media platforms, be it Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, others. You know, I think that Twitter in particular, you know, we've sort of had this shrinking or this deteriorating collective experiences that occur in the country. We sort of seen this as a decline of a public square. A lot of that has to do with the way the country's developed and sort of this sprawled out mess where everything requires a card for, you know, basic function of existence. But I think that Twitter in a lot of ways has allowed us to have and experience these collective moments and share them together, even with people that we, you know, may not have met in person or people that we may not see very often, but it allows us to do it all collectively at the same time. And Twitter is one of those things that makes, you know, has changed that. I think take things like the Oscars or the Super Bowl or the World Series or, you know, tragic events like the Boston Marathon bombing. Twitter allows everybody sort of be together in this one place collectively at the same time as it's going. And one thing that Twitter that I think, as far as creating a sense of community, it does a very good job of that. But one thing I think you know, Twitter also really does a great job of is a great platform for is his humor, and in particular snark. Twitter is a perfect platform for, you know, watching crappy award shows and just like dumping all over them as a whole, as a nation, enjoying it and you're having a good time, or making really quick-witted jokes about the blackout at the Superdome, or so. And it does allow us to recapture sort of the shared collective moments that we don't really have anymore because of this sort of, you know, this. Everybody is, you know, because we have so many entertainment options now, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that we can be so personalized and have so many things tailored to ourselves as individuals. That's good, but it's taken away sort of from, you know, when there were like 3 television channels and everybody watched the Ed Sullivan Show and would go and talk about it. Mm-hmm. Now people talk about it while it's happening with people around the world. So, and it sort of makes events that once were really big, you know, it still makes them big and shared in a different way.
Cheryl, to push that question to you, because your role is to speak directly to the community.
Right.
Do the net positives of social media far outweigh the negatives, and do you feel closer, or does the police department feel closer to the community because of the ability to speak directly to them via social media?
I think so. You know, what we noticed during the whole week of the Boston Marathon, we noticed that people, when we corrected information and when we put information out, a lot of people would tweet back, "I'm only going to follow the Boston police. If they don't tell me, I'm not going to believe it." So we did ourselves a lot of good. I mean, I think we enhanced our reputation by putting out information that was accurate, that was timely, and reliable, and people could rely on it. And people always ask me, what's the difference between being a reporter and having this job? And I said, well, when I was a reporter, I had responsibilities. And now with this job, I am responsible. So my reputation is part of this too. So we don't want to make any mistakes, and I don't want to put information out that's inaccurate or that we're not 100% sure of. And as we saw during this whole thing, I mean, this story was sort of evolving. So, minute to minute, when we were listening to, the possibility that someone was holding someone by, at gunpoint, everybody got excited and thought, this is it. And we didn't tweet it out. We all sat back and waited because, things change minute to minute. And there were a couple of leads along the way in some of the meetings that we had that sounded really positive. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is it. We've got it. And then, half an hour later would say, no, that didn't pan out after all. So I think there's a big responsibility that comes with any kind of reporting. And on Twitter, we're going to find that it will self-police itself by doing some of the things that when people see information that's wrong, they'll try to correct it. And hopefully other police departments will take the lead from us and do that as well, and correct information and put accurate information out so that people can understand what's happening and not feel like they're not getting the straight story right from the source.
I just want to add one thing to that too, and it's that I think Twitter also amplifies your mistakes. And we saw during the marathon, particularly if you're a national figure, John King, who I think is actually a very good reporter. I'm not just saying that because he's from Mass. I think he's a good reporter. He got hammered for what went wrong. But there were some other people who didn't get as crushed as much, and probably maybe should have. But CNN had a really bad week, and they took the blunt of it. And that was the thing I think, at least for me too. At least for me. It was essentially, I wanted to be very careful. And you're talking, going back again to that incident where that woman said she was held at gunpoint. The whole time I'm thinking, if I go out and am I wrong on this? Like, I'm screwed. I'm not a John King. I'm not going to be saved because I'm a big player. I'm not. But so yeah, you had to because you're going to get egg on your face if you're wrong. It's such a big moment. Everybody's watching you. The lights are as brightest. You have to be. And my approach was simply, I'd rather be right than first. So.
And I think that's a good strategy. I sympathized with him because having been in that position, especially during September 11th when I was reporting in New York, sources that you've had for a long time that you trust and have been incredibly reliable will tell you things, and you're starving for information, and you've got a newsroom and a news director who's wants information and wants someone to be first, and they want to break the news. So there's a lot of pressure on those folks, and I really do sympathize with that. And actually, the information that he had may have been something that somebody said, this guy looks really good. We're really looking at him. It looks like we're close to an arrest, and that got echoed, and that may have been, the Saudi guy that we thought looked good in the very beginning, and then that person didn't end up looking good after they did a little more investigating. So, the situation was changing internally, so I can certainly understand how someone would have given him that information, but 10 minutes later, that information changed. So that's the danger of it, and it's really a personal call that everybody has to make.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Again, just as a citizen, I was amazed, as all of us were, to see the way in which all of those images and content were brought together to identify the two suspects that were eventually apprehended. My question is, what happens to all that data afterwards? And again, I'm speaking this purely as a hypothetical, but I could imagine that in the police departments and the FBI and other authorities that receive this tons of information, there might well be, from a data mining standpoint, interesting data to be found in video which does not necessarily pertain to the particular reason for which that data was presented. My question is, first of all, is there a presumption that any information provided, whether via Twitter or video, is in a sense, information that can be mined for any judicial or police purposes, whether it's to, no matter how unrelated that may be to the original circumstance. And I'm kind of getting at the issue, and again, I don't have a bias one way or the other, whether or not in the future, if this is going to be becoming the prevailing way of identifying particular criminal activity, is there a potential gray zone here dealing with personal liberty or that could come out of this new way of finding the bad guy?
It's a great question, and I think in London they've had cameras for years there. I mean, probably 20 years, and a lot of their cameras are on one central system. You know, here, we didn't have, it's not like all of these businesses or even whatever cameras we would have had in that area that may have been city cameras are all on one system. They're not. So you're taking, you know, you're going to this store and you're getting this one's video, and then this person sent in video, and then CBS News gave you this video. So, you know, you're piecing this whole thing together. So I think, yeah, I think that's something that we absolutely have to think about. And I know it's going to be a balancing act, but right now, if you're out in the public domain, there are cameras everywhere. I mean, you know, if you use a Charlie card, someone knows what stop you got on and where you bought it. If you go through any toll booth, there are cameras there, and if you have an Easy Pass, that's getting recorded. You know, there are cameras everywhere. So I think that we're going to have to balance all of that with what you said is what investigative tools that they'll need in the event that something does happen. So instead of having 15 or 20 or, you know, 300 sources to go to, there'll be one central source that will be able to hook up all these cameras and be able to show what's really happening. So it's a great question.
And one of the things that's happening is police departments are getting way better at posting, you know, wanted photos and whatnot. The MBTA police in particular are great about putting up videos and photos of, especially the worse they look, the more they seem to like putting up these photos. But one of the things that happens
The worse
is
the suspect looks, or the worse the
the worse the suspect looks. Not under Cheryl, so this is not her. But when Boston police first got into this whole blogging and social media thing, it seemed like they sometimes went out of their way to embarrass, like, say, 20-something kids who would do really stupid things worth getting arrested for, but, you know, they put their photo up. And one of the things I'm running into now is I would post their photo. Well, it's the internet. Nothing dies on the internet. Now this kid is 25. He hasn't been in trouble. He hasn't, you know, done anything drunken outside District 14 in a few years. He goes to apply for a job. My post is the first thing that shows up, and you know, so he can't get a job now. Is that fair to him? You know, on the one hand, online is ephemeral. On the other hand, it's, you know, it's a permanent thing. So one of the things that I have to be more careful with is, you know, if it's like some kid, it's the first time he's been arrested, and it's a relatively minor offense, am I going to put his photo up? Am I going to, like, you know, even use his name? Nobody needs to know, do they need to know his name when it's just some stupid kid doing something?
I agree with you. I don't do it. I don't do it.
Well, I think we're at a max amount of time. So I appreciate everyone attending our great panel here. Interesting conversation. I think one that doesn't end today.